You have likely heard the phrase cancel culture. It's when someone speaks out or acts out and gets shunned by what's considered as a small but loud mob on social media. A boycott or ban follows and a cycle of outrage ensues. Joining us now with more insight into this cycle of outrage is inspirational speaker and author TJ Woodward. TJ, welcome back to Daily Flash.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so delighted to be here, and I look forward to this conversation on a very interesting topic.
Yeah, I think it's got a lot of people concerned and a lot of people talking. You say that when we cancel people, we are actually keeping the cycle of judgment and violence alive.
Yeah, and I think it's important to say, like, what do we mean by cancel culture? Cancel culture is when something happens in the world and then as you said, there's this mob on social media that attacks the person. It's really different than holding someone accountable or actually being accountable. But the idea of canceling someone in this sort of really violent way, honestly, without even having all the facts, that's the part that I'm talking about, that just keeps the cycle of violence alive, because we end up getting so angry and pointing fingers at someone, and that just, it just keeps the cycle alive.
There are so many news stories, TJ, that I can think of where we were told one story, but there was no context given. And then once we find out the real story behind it, there's never any real follow-up. It's sort of like, well, we want to apologize, we'll just let it go. You say canceling people can also be a way to avoid looking at ourselves.
Yeah, I think that's the deeper situation here. A lot of times we think we just focus outward on someone else. And as you said, people get accused of things in the media, and before people even have the facts, it seems like people jump on it and start finger pointing. And I think in some ways, what can be happening is something that is unresolved within someone gets externalized, projected outward. And then we think if we can just, hold that person accountable, then somehow we will have peace. And one thing that has been said is trauma doesn't show up as a memory, it shows up as a reaction.
Oh.
And sometimes this is a reaction to our own unresolved trauma, and we point it outward to someone else.
That's an astounding way of putting it. Instead of canceling people, what should we actually be doing?
Well, I think the power of the pause is really important here, because, if we're talking about our own individual journey, we're talking about that reactivity and what's unresolved and pointing outward. So we see something on social media and we have this sense to react or to finger point or to blame someone. Pause, check in with what's really going on with us, because really we need to wait to hear all the facts and see what happens. A story shows up, and then 3 months later, 3 weeks later, we find out, well, that's not really the whole story, or it wasn't completely factual. So pause, check in with what's really going on with us before we start finger pointing and getting angry at someone else.
TJ, why do you think so many people just take that information for face value? Is it because we just live in this ADD, social media, fast-paced society, and we just take it for granted that it is what it is, that headline is exactly what it is? Why don't people ask more questions?
Well, I think it seems easier on the surface, and you are right. We're in this instantaneous, we're scrolling along, we see something, there's a dopamine rush, and then we get angry and point outward. And that becomes an automatic, sort of response to what we see in the news. So I think the actual way that we can start to heal this is to unplug from that. And then when we see something and notice the reactivity, ask, well, I wonder what's really going on here. Maybe I don't have the whole story, but more importantly, what's going on in here, and how can I actually attend to that?
TJ, is there a moment in time where you can kind of pinpoint when or who started the cancel culture movement?
Well, I think it's been going on actually for centuries. If you look throughout history, there's always been an idea of creating the enemy or the other. And if we want to go even deeper into that, every war on planet Earth has always been created by the idea of us and them, and good and bad and right and wrong. And it doesn't mean there aren't things that happen in the world that are difficult, that need to be, people need to be held accountable. But this idea of automatically creating the other is how we get into trouble with cancel culture. And it really has been going on throughout human history. Now we just have social media, which just ramps it up.
Yeah, and I think you've hit on a really key point there, other, because it seems like some people get canceled, but other people don't, and oftentimes it's for the same thing. So there seems to be a weird justification from this, what I would consider a small, loud mob on social media versus, an entire generation or entire population of people.
Yeah, when we're in this idea of the other and someone in our camp does something, we might look away. But when someone that we perceive to be the other does something, we say, see, look, and then we go on attack. And that's really why we are being told we live in a divided country, which I don't think is true. I don't think we're really that polarized. I actually think we've been conditioned to have polarized thinking. And what I mean by that is, am I viewing someone who has a different point of view than I do as the other? Or can I start to become aware that it's okay for us to have differing points of view, and what might happen if we would actually come together and listen to each other instead of pointing fingers? And I think cancel culture, or this idea of canceling people on social media, is one pretty extreme example of that.
I think when it comes to the news business, they sell headlines and they sell fear and they want to keep people divided. But as you said, if you go out into your community, into your neighborhood, you're having normal conversations with people, even if you might not agree on the topic. If you're a victim of cancel culture, TJ, what's the remedy?
Well, I think that's a very difficult question because it can be really painful for people. I think if people want to react back, maybe it's pause. It's always this pause. Let's find out what's really going on. We can carefully state our version of what happened and realize that maybe what is being said about us isn't actually the truth, or certainly not the whole truth.
It's a terrific topic of conversation. TJWoodward.com is the website. The book is called Conscious Recovery, A Fresh Perspective on Addiction. It is the author of this best-selling book that has joined us today. TJ, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much. It was a delight to be with you.
We'll have this interview and more information on TJ available on our website, dailyflashshow.com.